Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. My guest today is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton Business School. She started working with Snoop Dogg, come on now, as an intern back and quickly rose through the ranks to lead his cannabis business development. She's also negotiated two of the largest licensing deals at the time in history of the cannabis space, and under her direction, Leafs by Snoop generated over $50 million in annual revenue while available in only two territories, Canada and Colorado. Most recently, she helped to launch Death Row Cannabis. Tiffany Chin, thank you so much and thank you for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for that intro.
Absolutely. Look, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, what you envisioned you were going to be doing for your career once you graduated from school?
Yeah, of course. So I was born and raised in the Midwest, born in Ohio, and I left before I turned 2 to Illinois. When I was 10, my dad's job moved him to Beijing. So I actually lived in China until I graduated from high school, went to an international school, and came back to the United States every summer, every winter, just to stay close to family and friends that were here. After university, I studied marketing management and minored in music, which you would imagine would be extremely useful in the management and music career. But it's not exactly like business management and business marketing is not managing talent, right? So as most people who graduate from Penn do, they end up going into consulting or banking. So I actually went into consulting for about 8 months, and it was in actuarial accounting and sciences, which was extremely dull. The most exciting project I had there was for the Department of Labor. So that should tell you kind of how that career trajectory might have gone. So I kind of took a big leap of faith and just applied for an internship out here in Los Angeles, moved myself from Philly all the way out here in a moment's notice, I would say less than 2 weeks, and started as an intern making like $1,500 a month, living in a back house of a lawyer's pool house, right? So that's how I ended up being in cannabis and working for Snoop. But it was definitely a windy road and definitely not what I expected I would be doing going through college and going through my professional career.
But let me pause you for a second. I mean, what did you see, an ad in the newspaper and said, I think I'm interested in cannabis? Were you already involved with cannabis on your own? Was it personal, or what was going on? I mean, what made you think?
Yeah, sure. I was really interested in being in entertainment. I think at the time it was like 2008, the financial crisis had just occurred and it was still definitely happening in a residual sense. And I really wanted to go into entertainment because I thought it was an extremely inelastic good, meaning people don't necessarily, they still spend money on entertainment, whether it's TV, video games, reading the internet, all these different types of things, they still spend money on. So I really wanted to be in entertainment. So I applied for an internship posting that was on my university website for careers. And I really didn't expect a callback. I had applied at William Morris, CAA, all the big agencies that you know and hear of out here in Hollywood and Los Angeles. But because I didn't have that previous experience or had done any internships in my college experience, no one wanted to take me on. So turns out that the owner of this management company also went to Penn. And not a lot of people from our university go into this industry. They end up going into banking, consulting, all those things. So I think once he saw my resume come across his table, he was like, bring her out here. Let's do it. Let's see what she can do. And it ended up being a really great experience. And here I am. Yeah.
Well, and you were not at all taken aback by cannabis? Had you been a cannabis enthusiast in college, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually first tried cannabis freshman year of college, as I think a lot of people might do. It was really hard to find and access in China when I lived there in the early and mid 2000s. So I remember in high school, senior year, and these three guys that were on our they were part of a jazz combo. They were on the side smoking weed, and all of us were like, "That's so bad for you. It's terrible. Why aren't they drinking?" And obviously, I have evolved my thinking after getting to know cannabis and understanding all the facets around it. And so throughout college, I dabbled a little bit, maybe more in junior and senior year, really got to be a frequent user. And when I actually applied for this internship, it wasn't for cannabis. It was just as a general entertainment intern to see whether or not, like a PA kind of, to see whether or not I'd be
Got it.
interested in this world and see if I wanted to stick around. The actual cannabis introduction and business opportunity didn't come until about 2 or 3 years after I had been an intern and a business development manager. And it was interesting at the time, it was 2014 and Colorado and Washington had just legalized. And so there was this mad dash to figure out what the strategy would be to potentially launch a celebrity backed brand, right? Are we looking to maybe partner up with other people like Cheech and Chong and Willie Nelson and the Marley family? Or are we going to do something on our own? Or do we not want to do anything at all and figure out a way to do a national thing in maybe a more non-federally regulated product, right? So like CBD or something. And so at the time, things were very narrow in terms of how we could move. So we decided to explore Colorado and Washington and see what the opportunities were. At the time, Snoop's manager, who owned the management company in which I was employed, looked around the office and was like, there's nobody in our office who smokes weed every day and also has business knowledge and prowess, except for Tiffany. And he knew that I was like, he knew that I smoked every day. But he was also like, I think this is going to be a really great idea because Tiffany doesn't look like the average smoke weed every day kind of person, right? And the way that she presents herself may be disarming to some people that are frequently seeing certain types of individuals in the cannabis space, right? And he was like, also your knowledge in the cannabis space is really, I don't want to say unmatched, but it's interesting because when I first moved out here, I'm gonna give you this fun story. When I first moved out here, I was not willing to sign up for a medical card in California. I don't know why. I was young. I didn't want my name on a record. I'm really not sure what my logic was 10, 15 years ago. So I ended up asking one of my coworkers at the company, at the management firm, was like, I actually have a friend. He is the drummer in my boyfriend's band, and he actually grows cannabis in the gray market. And he sells it by the pound to dispensaries. I'm going to introduce you to him. He will hook a homie up for an ounce or whatever. And so she gives me his number. I text him. He comes down to my place. And as these deals go, I get into his car on the passenger side. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's very awkward to look at somebody at a 90-degree angle, as opposed to like when you're sitting across a table from someone and you can freely have a nice conversation while looking at them. So I immediately look at him and I'm like, wow, this guy is really cute. And I look like crap. I haven't showered. My clothes probably have some stains on it. I haven't brushed my teeth. Here's your money. Give me my weed. Bye. 3 months later, I was like, okay, I want to get some more. And I actually texted him and said, hey, I'd like to get some more cannabis, but also, I don't know if you remember what I look like. Would you like to go out for a drink sometime? 12 years later, we're now married and we have a kid. And the great thing about it is, yeah, it's funny. The great thing about it is that because of his, it's not huge. It was maybe like 10,000 square feet indoor facility, but it gave me the jumpstart knowledge aside from the business aspect of things and understanding supply chain and everything else, how to grow cannabis, right? So I'm not going to say I'm an expert at all in any way, shape, or form, but I have been to many, many dispensaries and many, many grow facilities around the world. And Snoop trusts my abilities and my eye to understand whether or not a facility really is up to snuff for his quality standards. So that's a little bit about why and how I got into this spot. And I would say it's a bunch of like happy accidents that just ended up being really, really well. Like my performance obviously may not have been an accident, but to get into this spot, to fall into it, I would say someone guided me here. I don't know who it is, but I'm glad to be here.
That's great. Look, if I can, and I hope you don't mind, I'd love to just pick your brain a little bit because, there are so many misconceptions about cannabis in China. Let's go back to that experience there for a bit, because I understand like right now, China is growing, probably has some of the largest hemp fields in the world waiting to unleash this on the planet. At least that's what I've heard. And, I have no legitimate reasons for believing that. But Tell me a little bit about cannabis and China and how they feel about it, and what's going on. And should we all fear the fact that 5 years from now that's where we'll be buying it from?
Yeah, I mean, China is where things are made, right? Regardless of what it is, if there's a product, it's usually made in China, just for cost purposes. I know that things are shifting to South Asia as well as population densities change, but growing up in China, it was most definitely conservative when it came to sex and drugs, right? So anything drug related other than cigarettes, which is really interesting, were really looked down upon. And, I never even entertained smoking marijuana until I was in college. And I would say that added.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it was truly illegal. So if you got caught with cannabis in China, would you go to jail? I mean, I'm telling you, I've had people fill me with a whole bunch of both. And I've been told there's areas in China where cannabis kind of grows freely, and as long as you're not selling it, nobody complains, right? Or is that true?
I mean, if you look back at the lineage of cannabis, it's from China, right? And we actually, in Chinese, it's called dama, which is like the big mother plant. And I believe that it has been used in medicinal purposes for many, many years throughout history in China.
3,000 plus.
3,000 years, yeah. And no, I would say that if anything, I'm not an expert when it comes to, I just lived there and I didn't really get to interact as much with the local community as I probably should have, just because we were sequestered in a very closed off international community space. But I would probably liken it back to when Mao and the Cultural Revolution happened in the 50s and 60s. They really demonized a lot of not just products, but habits or things that people would do that wouldn't be for the communal good. And I believe that cannabis would most definitely fall under that. So given the history of things and how it has definitely been used in Eastern medicine for millennia, I believe that it's very similar to a lot of things in the Western society where things have then been controlled for some purposes or other, ulterior motives and things that may, like for example, cannabis and crack, like crack cocaine, definitely to malign the Black and brown community, right? And to lock them up. And that was not said out loud, but it's now most definitely acknowledged. So I'm wondering if it's a similar situation in China where when the new powers came to be in the mid-century of the last century, they were trying to control the population through behaviors that they thought were unsavory. And I most definitely think cannabis use would fall under that, which it's really great to see a lot of people now trying to change that perception and narrative of, maybe you call us stoners, but we're still productive. We're extremely productive members of society. We're not stoners that are just laying out on the floor and strung out. That's not something that cannabis is for. So that's a great question. I haven't had that question yet, and it's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I just also, I am now, maybe I'm wrong, but I know as you travel around the world representing its brand and looking at cannabis and CBD and cannabinoids and things, I have been told, and maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me if I am wrong. I want to be corrected. I've been told that there are millions of acres of hemp being grown right now in China. Is that true? Is that false? Is that some bullcrap that somebody made up?
From what I know, from my sources as well, I think you're right. I think that's all happening in central China. And, the east coast of China is where all the population lives. And there's some in the west as well. But central China is really, really great for agriculture. And they're probably ready, getting geared up and ready for all of the different things that hemp can actually do and produce, like plastics, like bedding, like concrete. Sure. It's not going to be called concrete. It'll be called hempcrete. But like making a car. I don't know if you know this, but Ford made a car out of hemp back in the 1900s. Like that was one of the first cars he made. It was made out of hemp.
Absolutely. A lot of people didn't know that. And as a matter of fact, Ford actually made the car run off of hemp seed oil. People don't know that. He wasn't looking for petroleum. He was using hemp seed oil.
I didn't know that. I thought they made one that ran off.
No, I think at his first round of this, I think was that again, you hear the rumors. I don't know, who knows what's true or what's false. But if you have heard, so there is hemp being grown in China in anticipation of broader use worldwide.
Um, yeah, I was just going to say it's international commerce is already happening. Canada, as one of the largest federally legal territories, is allowed to export product to a bunch of European countries and Australia and New Zealand. So it's really interesting to see how the federal borders coming down for cannabis is affecting international commerce. And if and when China comes in, even if it's only on the hemp side of things, that's going to be a game changer in terms of product flooding the market and alternative sources of biomass. I think that's going to be a huge, huge, huge thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the United States don't even recognize the fact that right now in Colombia, there's probably 1 million acres set aside right now to grow hemp in Colombia. In South Africa, Lesotho is also growing 1 million acres worth of hemp and cannabis-based products. So, I mean, what we're doing here, it's really funny. I often say, it's how dare we think that we lead the planet when we're only 330 million strong, but the rest of the world has been really leading and taking the lead in this in a way that hopefully we can try to catch up.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that the only thing that we can say we're winners at maybe is the culture of California and bringing cannabis wide. And I think Death Row Records from the 90s was really instrumental in doing so and bringing the vibe of good times, house parties, good music in conjunction with cannabis, and bringing that wide to the community and understanding that it's not supposed to be vilified.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Earlier, Jess, you mentioned the fact that your current husband, then prospective boyfriend, was working in the gray market. Why don't you explain what the gray market is, everybody, so I understand?
Yeah, sure. So the gray market essentially is everything before, in California specifically, everything before 2016. So 2016 is when cannabis was legalized recreationally for everyone in the state above the age of 21. Prior to that, there was a compassionate care program where you could get a medical license from a doctor. And I want to say doctor in quotes because, yes, they are MDs, but you would essentially pay $50 to $100, talk to a doctor, and tell them your reason for why you want cannabis. Most people say back pains, I have trouble sleeping, I have glaucoma. And you end up seeing a lot of these excuses parodied in media, right? Like in TV shows or in movies. The thing is, there are most definitely people who can benefit, like cancer patients and everything from cannabis. But at the time, there were most definitely over 50% of the medical users were technically recreational users. Like I'll tell you, I was one of them. But I have found that.
I'm sorry, I was not to interrupt you, but I would kind of flip that the other way because just hear me out. Even though you find yourself or you would declare yourself a recreational user, I would say that, if I had a 20-minute conversation with Tiffany, I might find out that you do it because, you know what, Montel, it just makes me feel more relaxed. Montel, I do it because I feel more creative. Montel, I do it because, you know what, when I come home, I want to just take the stress off. Well, guess what? From my perspective, easing stress, relaxing, even becoming more creative is medical in some ways. And so I like to look at it the other way. I like to say that more than 90%, even those who go to a store recreationally and buy, don't even know that they're buying for a deeply laden medical reason. And so therefore, if we change the perspective, huh?
I was going to say, I fully agree. I'm sorry to interrupt. I fully agree.
No, don't bother. I think that nowadays, and as we're looking at it, I mean, in the last 2 years alone, every year for the last 2 years, there's been well over 3,500 peer-reviewed published documents worldwide talking about the medical efficacies of cannabis. And that's in everything from, research that was done last year in Australia that proved that cannabis and some of the cannabinoids have are some of the only chemicals on the planet that have extreme impact on things like pancreatic cancer. We are seeing cannabis. Actually, I'm an MS survivor, and I have been using cannabis since my day of diagnosis because it actually impacts my symptoms. No ifs, ands, or buts, different than any other drug that I could ever probably come in contact with. And I know so many other people, I think, Sanjay Gupta made people think that cannabis only works for seizures, but cannabis works for almost any and every ailment on the planet in some way, shape, or form. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody needs to have a medical card. That just means that let's make sure that what we make available to people is as efficacious medically as it is recreationally.
Yes, I fully agree. And there obviously needs to be more research done. It's crazy to think that the only facility allowed in the United States to do research on cannabis for the longest time was the University of Mississippi. And Montel, I don't know if you ever saw those sample packs of pre-rolls that they were handing out to
Are,
patients
are,
during the
are you
testing
kidding
period.
me? Are you kidding me? 12 years ago, before most people even knew about it, I had Irv on my show. Irv gave me one of the canisters. They have some of the dankest, roughest, nastiest weed on the planet that was grown at the University of Mississippi. But what
Like
people don't
brown.
understand, but people don't understand they were growing it to disprove its efficaciousness, which is different than growing something to just see what it does. The same way they researched it in Israel and other places on the planet. Yeah, I know you probably don't know this about me, but I've been involved in this industry now for 22 years, long before it was vogue. I think even before, or right at the same time that the Death Row records were coming out and talking about smoking weed every day. I was one of those that was promoting the opportunity and had an opportunity to go to places like Israel and other places around the world to actually look at the way cannabis was being utilized. And when you just said, a lot more research needs to be done, I got to tell you something, my dear. If you really look at the amount of research that's been done on cannabis, there has been no other drug or no other chemical known to man that has been researched as much as cannabis has. So really, sometimes I feel like that's something that's just said by politicians that don't know what they're talking about. Because the truth of the matter is, I think there's 35,000 peer-reviewed studies out there right now about, or not studies, peer-reviewed documents published about cannabis, more so than any other chemical, more so than the aspirin that's in your medicine cabinet. So, the research is there. Now what we have to do is start actually culling the research, looking at the research and researching the research so we understand the fact that this is a viable product for most people to consider. And especially when every day the pharmaceutical industry is shoving a new drug down your throat that's got more side effects than anything else in nature, where you could take something in nature and literally ease some of the problems that you're having. So, no, I mean, I agree with you that yes, still more research needs to be done, but let's just look at the stuff that's already been done so far to date.
Oh, I was just saying, maybe what it is instead, I should say, is that the research that's already out there needs to be packaged and marketed in a correct and better way for the masses to understand it and accept it. I think that you're right. There has been a plethora of research done, but even someone like me has not seen all of these documents and all of these peer-reviewed, statistically significant population type of studies, right? So that's important, and I think that the exposure to that is what's needed.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's a considerable amount of more research that needs to get done. I think what we ought to do is spend a little bit of time culling the research that's already been done. And then, proceeding on the way we are as in an industry. One of the things that I find that's crazy about this industry is that we do such a great job from a B2B standpoint, but we don't do that great of a job from a B2C standpoint. Wondering, and what I mean by B2C is I'm talking about business to consumer. I mean, it's almost like when we first started in this business, everybody was trying to educate the consumer, and then all of a sudden we just let that go. Let's figure out how many more deals we can make and sell more weed. But let's go back and understand that there's still a population here that needs to understand why cannabis. That's something that I think that just my dumb opinion, but I really think that, because now Snoop is such a recognized ambassador for products of everything from, Skechers to you name it. And the consumer, whereas 10 years ago, may have looked at what he's doing with a jaded eye. Now they're actually impressed by and looking at it more, favorably. So I'm not saying why not in an aspersion kind of a way, but why not spend a little bit more time turning Snoop and helping Snoop get his messages across about the positive effects of cannabis and what he sees. He could be one of the master educators right now and, lead a generation into cannabis that has been still trying to push away. What do you think? I don't know.
That's definitely so. Based on which territories we launch into, we have very different strategies around how much and if to educate, right? So in the California market and in some other more mature markets, we find that efforts are not as necessary. But in other markets, we do educate not only about the brand and what type of niche or category we are falling into, but also the different types of usage, as well as the different type of cannabinoids that are infused or naturally occurring in the product itself, and what effects it may or may not have. On the more scientific side of things, with the research of, like now CBN, CBG, CBD, all those other cannabinoids that are not getting the top bill as THC is, I think that there are a lot of beliefs and understandings, but not yet mass adoption into those, because everyone's still focused on what's the best bang I can get for my buck and how high can I get, right? And it's not about that. It is about having a good time. But, I think everything right now is trying to test at 25+% THC, but people don't understand that the high anxiety that people get from smoking cannabis is because of the lack of whole plant cannabinoids that usually support the THC. So
absolutely. I mean, I'm saying I also have a brand out, and I see this all over the place where I'm all over the country. In Massachusetts, I'm getting ready to go into Georgia. And unfortunately, I think this is where the industry has done itself as a disservice, because as much as we have been trying to figure out how fast we can sling weed, we have not figured out the demographic we need to be slinging it to. When you take a look at how high can I get, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I would think that, you're really talking about a demographic, which was the old, marketing demographic for all products, 18 to 34. That's why we look at TV. You just see 18 to 34-year-olds in all the commercials. Well, when it comes to cannabis, the 18 to 34-year-old, I go visit dispensaries. I do dispensary pop-ups in Massachusetts all the time. I'm about to do another group next month in June. When I show up at the dispensary, we start to see that the demographic changes throughout a day. There's, probably a greater percentage of baby boomers and close to baby boomers that are in the store because I'm there, because that's my demo. But at the same time, these are the ones who need this product even more so than the younger generation. We've proven it. You look in Israel. Israel looks at cannabis as a geriatric drug. You look at Europe. They're looking at it as a drug to help seniors and people who are getting older who are on multiple medications get off some of those medications that they're on. Here in the United States, we're still trying to sling weed to get you as high as you want. Well, the 65-year-old grandma isn't really interested in getting as high as she can be and not being able to deal with life. She just wants some relief from the fact she can't sleep. She wants some relief from that neuropathic pain she's got in her feet from arthritis. She wants some relief from that gout. She wants, so we have to start, I think, educating enough to make people understand that, again, not just from a whole plant perspective. I had an opportunity, fortunately, I was very blessed to be able to actually sit down with Dr. Meshulam in his office in Israel and had a really long conversation with him. He impressed upon me in that conversation that, Montel, cannabinoids are like an orchestra. I can play Beethoven without drums, but it's not Beethoven. Though the strings are more prominent in Beethoven, the drums are still there. That's what actually has the oomph behind the music. Well, why would I want to just have cannabis that only has strings in it when the oomph behind the movement could be the CBG, could be the CBN, could be the A version, the acid variants of every single one of them that actually enforces or helps to, in some ways, give my body the homeostatic relief that it's supposed to get from the plant. When we try to isolate just THC, do we really hit homeostasis? Remember, and you know this, but our bodies are, and all mammals on this planet were genetically grown to actually consume cannabis because we have receptors in our bodies that are made to not just receive THC, but CBG, CBN, CBD. We have other, and we're just now starting to discover all that. That needs to be, I think, enforced to ensure the longevity of cannabis as a product and not just something that came. I can remember things like called poppers and other little things that kind of came and went. Guess what? Cannabis has been around a long time, but it's only going to stick around a longer time if we actually start to make people understand the entire plant, the reason why it's a value. And, when we come back to just plant-based medicine, I'm a very strong believer in the fact that what Albert Einstein said in the last century is true. For every action is an equal and opposite reaction. So for every disease on this planet, nature put a cure for it on this planet, and it put it in probably a plant-based medicine. We should be looking at cannabinoids as that plant-based medicine that we have not figured out. 20 years from now, we're going to start to understand that there may be a cannabinoid that we haven't even mentioned yet that could be the direct cure for 20 different illnesses. Unless we actually start studying it, we won't know. But yeah. So tell me a little bit about Leafs. And that was the fact that was one of the first celebrity brands available in the country. And you have those both in the United States and in Canada. But in Canada, they have this weird thing where celebrities can't market cannabis, right?
Correct. So we actually launched in the medical market in Canada, and those regulations were not in place. Those limitations were not in place. And so we were able to essentially get into the market, get into people's heads and minds and understanding before we had to drastically pare down our colorways, our branding, taking out the word Snoop from our brand. And when we developed the brand name back in 2014, we actually had these thoughts and created the brand with that potential situation in the future. So this is another interesting story around how the brand came to be. We initially tried to retcon LBC. So we were trying to figure out how that acronym could be utilized for Snoop. He always raps about it. He's from Long Beach, and it just makes a lot of sense. So we thought of Leafs by Calvin. When we ended up shopping that around to some focus groups, a lot of them were like, I'm thinking of underwear, or I think of Calvin and Hobbes. And immediately we're like, no, we can't do that, right? And all of our potential licensees were all telling us the brand needs to have the word Snoop or DOGG in it. It has to have preferably both, but if it needs to just be one, it can be just be one. Otherwise, we don't see the value in this opportunity. And so I said we should call it LBS and we should call it pounds. Unfortunately, as the design process went through and we went down the road of choosing logos and fonts and colorways and everything, the LBS was depicted as Leafs by Snoop, and it was all in capital letters. So for that reason, it didn't immediately click with the average user that it was supposed to be referred to as pounds, which is obviously a colloquial way of saying, Snoop, I think he has a song with 50 Cent where it's called like, I smoke a pound staring at the caddy on the showroom floor. And it's like all these things about like ounceage. And I even remember people in Canada saying to me, we use the metric system up here. Do you think that's going to be a problem? And I said, ask anyone in the gray market or anyone who has been a cannabis user for a long time in Canada. And you tell me how they portion out their cannabis. And the thing is, they still sell them in 1 gram, 3.5 grams, 7 gram, 14 gram, 28 gram increments. Why? Because those are based in the standard system we have in the United States off of ounces and pounds. So, that was really, it was an interesting exercise. We went from a beautiful package and beautiful presentation to a monochrome white background and a tiny logo because it couldn't be any larger than the warning logo. But because we were essentially grandfathered in from the medical market and we had, I believe, about 9 months to live and breathe in the medical market, people already immediately associated it once we made the transition from Leafs by Snoop to LBS. Unfortunately, that product is no longer in the market. That brand is no longer in the market. I think there were some issues that our partner up in Canada had. I'm sure you've heard of them, Canopy Growth and Tweed. I know that after the success of the Snoop line, they expanded their licensing division quite a bit. I believe they signed on Drake and Justin Bieber, Martha Stewart, Houseplant with Seth Rogen. And from my cursory knowledge, obviously they didn't share the exact numbers with us, but Snoop outperformed all of them combined by a large percentage. A new CFO came in who I believe ended up becoming CEO and just completely scrapped that entire division without looking at the demarcation among the different brands and understanding that one of the brands was carrying all the others, right? So it was kind of just a hack and slash. We're actually coming out with some new product in Canada this summer. So look out for that.
Great.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, I'm assuming that Leafs is everywhere around the country where we can get cannabis, or am I wrong?
Yeah, it was available all over in Canada.
How about the United States?
Oh, in the United States, it was only available in Colorado. At the time, I had secured some other deals in at least, I believe, 5 or 6 other states. I don't know what ended up happening with my boss at the time and Snoop's manager at the time. But I didn't have as free of a direct line to Snoop himself as I do now. So I wasn't able to present him all these opportunities, and it got filtered through. But, my previous manager was amazing. He was the one who, pointed me out and said, "You're the one that's going to run this." I still keep in touch with him to this day, but he and Snoop have separated. So, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, then, talk to me a little bit more about some of the challenges you still face even to today when it comes to licensing in this space.
Yeah. So what Snoop likes to do is he likes to find something he loves. And I'm not even just talking about cannabis. I'm talking about just anything like shoes, or like you said, Skechers, or a drink, or a type of flavor. And then he wants to bring it to a wider audience, right? So he wants to put his name on it or figure out some way to invest into it and bring it to a wider audience. So that is the thesis in which I am pursuing these expanding the brand and offering high quality cannabis to fans around the country and hopefully in the future, the world. The issue I would say that's been the most pressing this time around, because this time around, we're really focused on the quality of product. So much so that I want to make sure there is at least one strain or product SKU in any product mix in any territory that Snoop will actually consume. And if not, at least he will be able and very proud to present to his homies, this is my product, right? I'm not sure if that was the case previously. I don't think it was. But I know now with the SOPs that we have developed, he is constantly actually trying to get us to give him more product from our California market. So what's been difficult about that is any group outside of California that we want to work with that grows quality cannabis, they probably already sell through it all because it's good weed. It's good product. They have the market on lock. And if they are a well-positioned company, solvent, and have good business operations, why are they going to want to bring another group on if they're already selling through all their cannabis, right? They have to see a greater value to things. And that's actually what Snoop does bring, right? He comes in and he's like, I actually like your product. Like I'm not just trying to make a deal here. I've sent my head of QA QC, Shaggy. Shaggy has been with Snoop for 15 years. He worked as his sound engineer, the night shift. So what ends up happening in the night shift is it gets a little dead. And so Snoop and Shaggy end up just smoking and talking about weed for hours. And so now, after we get a deal going, I will send Shaggy out to Michigan or Illinois, whatever territory we are looking to do. And he also has grown in the past. He will do a walkthrough as well as QA, QC the product. And he and his team actually do a little bit of secret shopping sometimes as well to make sure our product is always very much up to our standards in any territory. Right now, Death Row Cannabis is only available in California, but soon, hopefully by the end of this year, in several other territories. We're working some of these deal points out, getting them executed, as well as looking at our product release timeline. But yeah, in terms of the licensing industry, it's really hard for a lot of groups. So let's say they're not a celebrity-backed brand. It's going to be hard for these groups to figure out and vet which companies, which production agencies or licensed facilities are right for them, because their brand ethos might be different than what their production partner actually espouses. So there's so many different ways that there can be friction among the actual brand owner and SOP owner, the IP owner, versus the actual production facilities in each territory. So we're trying our best to figure out the best producers in each category and territory, and working with them to bring them and elevate them and bring them the Snoop Halo effect.
Got it, for sure. Well, at some point in time, as you're looking down the road, I still think that, there probably would be no better champion than Snoop to actually flip the switch real quick on people and become the educator. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I think people would go, are you kidding me? Yeah, I think it would really like it. What's next? What's next for Snoop and you?
I would say what's next is definitely expanding the brand nationwide and then internationally as well, and figuring out which new categories we're looking at. We're looking at the hemp market. That's something that is federally legal and extremely attractive. We can get the brand and we can get Snoop into, I don't want to say all 50 states, but there are some states who have restricted hemp-derived cannabinoids and Delta-9 access, just because I think they want to protect their recreational markets, which is totally understandable. But to go state by state and look in the major market versus like a large swath potentially with a hemp product, whether it's a beverage or a gummy or a vape or whatever it is, it's easier to market, and it's easier to get into people's hands and understand that like hemp is federally legal. I don't know how this is still, I know they're working through it in Congress. The FDA has decided not to regulate it. All of my lawyers are telling me a couple different things every week. So it's always interesting to see and follow on what's happening. But I would say that expansion and product R&D are our biggest things coming up.
Super. Well, I tell you always got a home here. If you want to come back and chat a little bit more, we'd love to have you for sure. And tell Snoop I'd love to have him on if he ever wants to come on. I've had some fairly decent luminaries on, so I think he would, like to, if you take a look at our lineup of shows, he'd see that he fit very well in. Yes. And if there's anything I can ever do, let me know.
I really appreciate that, and I will definitely let Snoop know and try to get him on here. I think he doesn't mind doing Zooms now because he knows he can do it from the comfort of his own recording studio and the compound. So
sure,
we'll figure out a way to get you out to Snoop's compound as well.
Cool.
He has like 150,000 square foot space where there's like 5 recording studios. Yeah, it's.
I literally was in his compound out there once, and I guess his previous manager, we were working on a project together with the Last Prisoner project. That would have been a really decent one, but that kind of fell apart because as they parted ways. But let's circle back around and see if there's something synergistic we can do.
Yeah, actually, if we're just to reference, I know you said the Last Prisoner project. Do you know who Weldon Angelos is, or the Weldon Project?
I do know D'Angelo.
Okay, yeah. So Steve D'Angelo is different than Weldon Angelos. They're two completely different people. So Weldon Angelos, actually back in the 90s was a engineer for Tupac and Snoop and some other Death Row Records artists. I think he was in Arizona when he got picked up by the police for possession with intent to distribute and got thrown in jail for, I think, 13 or 17 years. Recently got out in 2020, commuted by Trump, and then worked with Biden last year to announce federal record expungements in November last year. So he is essentially working, it's called the Weldon Project and Green Mission. And what they do, and we're partnered with them, obviously Snoop and Weldon have known each other for a long time, is raise money for extremely obviously effective ways to help individuals who have been incarcerated by the war on drugs. So things like commissary. It doesn't even, when I was talking to him, he was like, people don't realize that you can't get a toothbrush. You can't get like toilet paper. There's just some basic things outside that you don't realize are just like luxuries, or, helping the families of the people who are incarcerated, or legal help. So there are very obvious, here are the $5,000 that we are committing to these 3 families, right? So it's very, where your money's going, and you feel very, you understand the impact of what he and his group is doing. So that's the one thing I'd like to plug. You should check out the Weldon Project with Weldon Angelos.
Okay, well, give me some. You should get some information to our office about that, because I tell you, we've worked very closely with the LS Prison Project and helped to, get several people, at least the movement, to get them out of prison. I've gotten responses back from governors, states attorneys, and attorney generals, and so let me know, and let's see if there's something we can do for you.
I'll probably make an introduction. This doesn't need to be recorded, but I'm gonna make an introduction to him and his PR team, and I think that would be great.
Great. No, thank you so much. And you take care of yourself. You be well. And thank you so much for being a part of our show today. And thank you for tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Make sure you see the next one. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.